Hello and welcome to our first episode. I'm Craig Hewitt, the founder of Castos, and with me is Andy Baldacci. Andy, how's it going?
Good. Yeah, I'm excited that we're doing this.
Yeah. So Andy, I guess we need to give folks that don't know us and kind of what we've been up to a bit of an idea of who we are and kind of what we're doing here. So do you want to
Probably a good
kind
idea.
of kind of introduce yourself and give a bit of update on kind of what your business is and kind of what y'all do?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Andy Baldacci. I run SaberSim, and what we do is we make software and produce data models to make it easy for players to build better lineups for daily fantasy sports. My background is as a professional gambler for about a decade. So I played poker professionally and then transitioned into daily fantasy sports. On the side of all of that, I was kind of just learning everything I could about business, about marketing, startups, whatever it was. Like that was really my passion. But at the time, I didn't see a good way to get my foot in the door and just kind of kept grinding it out on the gambling side of it. And we were transitioning into just more traditional sports betting and building out models for that, and needed some data. And that we came across a site called SaberSim. We had heard about them before. We knew they had really good data on baseball specifically. Reached out to the founder, found out that it was a much smaller operation than I thought. And so the conversation kind of quickly went from buying data to investing in the company to acquiring the company. And so from first conversation to purchase agreement signed was probably 6 to 8 weeks. And so, yeah, we bought the company, structured the deal in a way where the founder would stay on board, get a salary, and earn a good chunk of equity back over a couple of years. That deal closed in December of 2018. At the time, I was actually working full time at Groove. I had left kind of gambling behind for the most part. I was still doing some betting, but yeah, I was working full time at Groove as a marketer, and then left in February 2019 to run SaberSim. And we can get into kind of what we've done in the meantime, but the kind of cliff notes of it was just by focusing relentlessly on the product, and trying to stand out in what's actually kind of a crowded niche. We were able to get some great traction and basically grew about 5x of revenues last year, but obviously COVID hit and revenue kind of went to zero, and we've since climbed back to a new high watermark. So if you look kind of at the graph, it's up and to the right, down to zero, back up, and in between was a lot of stress, a lot of lessons learned. But it's definitely been a great journey that I'm happy to kind of dig into more and keep going with from here. But yeah, that's kind of the cliff notes on what I've been up to.
That's cool. I would love to talk more about the kind of stress of the middle part of this year. I'm sure you don't want to talk about it, but I think that there's probably a lot of lessons that we'll chat through at some point, just around like managing stress and uncertainty in the business and not knowing kind of where things are going and how you guys manage cash flow and team and stuff like that. Like, I think there's a lot of good lessons we can pull out for folks there.
Yeah, for sure, and that's definitely something I'd love to. Well, love is probably the bad word choice for that one, but I think it would be interesting to dig into, because yeah, it's still. I mean, even now we're at a better spot, but there's still a ton of uncertainty, and we've really just even this last week or two kind of reshaped how our team is structured and how we're kind of planning growth from here to better reflect that uncertainty, and a lot of lessons that we can dig into there in a future episode. And then on your end, Craig, yeah, why don't you catch people up? I know you kind of have more of at least in my perspective, a bit more of a public persona on what you've been up to just through being on Tiny Seed Tales and just your own podcasting, kind of digging the lessons a little bit deeper. But I'm sure there's still people out there who aren't as familiar with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So my name's Craig Hewitt. I'm the founder of Castos and Podcast Motor, which as of July 1st kind of all became one. So the Podcast Motor kind of business unit runs under the Castos corporate umbrella as of July 1st. And so that's another thing that we could probably talk about at some point, is kind of why we did that and what it looks like and everything. But the short version is a lot of our customers are the same, and we thought there was a lot of synergies and kind of putting all of our eggs in one basket, if you will. But yeah, so Castos is a podcast hosting platform, and essentially we have a professional services arm there now that is a productized service in podcast motor. We call it Castos Productions under the Castos umbrella, and we're a team of 7 full-time people at Castos/Podcast Motor, and about 15 contractors. A lot of those are on the services side. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about this show maybe is that Andy and I are both non-technical founders, and so I think a lot of what we want to talk about is marketing, because it's a lot of what we do, and kind of strategizing on marketing, business development, enterprise stuff. We're starting to get into enterprise, and I know that you guys are kind of looking into it too. Yeah, and I think Andy, I think maybe like kind of talk about why we wanted to do this podcast. Like, there's a bunch of podcasts out there, but like maybe where we're trying to fit in the like podcast ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll still kind of have some figuring out to do of where exactly we fit in as we kind of the show shapes up. But I know when you reached out about doing this, I think we both kind of had similar ideas and similar I don't know what aspirations, but we had similar goals for the show. Where for me personally, I've always enjoyed listening to other founder podcasts, especially in kind of the microconf sort of bootstrapped or lightly fundraised world. There's a lot of good podcasts out there, but a lot of them are from people on the more technical side. And I know that we have a different perspective on things. And for me personally, like I think just having someone to kind of bounce ideas off of and walk through things, even if it's in public, is something that I think is valuable. And on my own podcast, The Effective Founder, it's an interview show where I interview other founders, but I also sometimes would do kind of just update episodes on what I've been working on, where I'm struggling, what's worked, what hasn't. And those are some of the most popular episodes that I had. And so it just felt as though while there are a good number of other podcasts out there that may be similar, there's still an appetite for more of this type of content out there. And I think just the working in public and just sharing what we're learning as we're learning it is valuable to listeners, but also to us. It keeps us accountable and makes it easy not easy, but it kind of can help accelerate some of our own learnings. But what was kind of going on in your head when you were thinking about this, Craig?
Yeah, I think a lot of the same things. And I think to kind of add to what you mentioned is kind of where we are in our journey. It is interesting. Mm-hmm. So we are not going to talk about revenue or anything like that. I think we're not those kind of transparent founders, and there's nothing against that, but that's just not us. But to give a bit of context on where we are, and I think you guys are the same, like, we're past the default alive stage. We both have several full-time people on our team, and kind of have been profitable at times. And I think profitability is something that we'll definitely probably have several episodes about, and trying to define that for people, businesses that are growing quickly and have a lot of changes going on in them, even throughout a month. Trying to define what profitable is I think very hard. But we're at a stage in our business where we're not trying to figure out how to get our first 100 customers, but we're trying to figure out how to get to 7 and 8 figures of revenue. I don't know, 8 figures would be really amazing, but trying to get to this degree of scale that I think a lot of us are looking for. And so I think that it was really an interesting opportunity for you and I to podcast together, because I feel like we're at really similar points right now. And that's cool too. But yeah, I think talking a lot of marketing and business strategy, I guess, growing the team and how to grow the team and what does the team need. And I mean, even frankly, like, we're hiring a developer right now. how do you hire a good developer, and like
Yeah.
where should you look for them, and how do you interview them as a non-technical person? A lot of those kinds of questions. So I think that, yeah, all the stuff we've said, I hope gives a decent picture. We still don't have a name for the podcast as of
We'll
recording
get
our
there.
first
We'll get
episode.
there.
We'll get there. Yeah.
No, I think yeah, just touching a little bit more on that. It's that idea about kind of being at the default alive or a little bit beyond that stage where we have businesses that at times are profitable, that could be profitable if we wanted to kind of get a lean operation in there. But it's just at that stage, it's definitely there are different concerns than when you're kind of first putting that idea, that product, whatever it is, out there into the market. And I feel as though you should never stop learning, but at the same time, we're not trying to see if people want what we have. We're trying really to scale up what's working, and kind of fine tune things. But yeah, it's just different challenges that I think we hadn't seen covered as much, and so hopefully by kind of just sharing as we sort of fumble around and figure it out for ourselves, that'll be valuable and kind of fill in some of the gaps that might be out there in this space.
We're looking for podcast market fit, I guess, or hoping we
Yeah.
can find it. Yeah. Yeah, I put a tweet out. I'm not active on Twitter that much, and I know, Andy, you're not like at all, right?
Yeah. It was interesting. Like I've never been like, I get super like self-conscious where I'm like, I don't have anything important to say. And I feel like if I send out a tweet, it has to be like this kind of like revolutionary thing. So I would just like never tweet, and I would read a ton though. But then when kind of everything was ramping up around COVID, it just was weighing on my mood too much.
Hmm.
Even if I like parsed down who I was following and this and that, it wasn't a net positive for me. And so, yeah, I have a Twitter account. I actually probably haven't logged in like a month. So, long answer to that is no, I'm not active really at all there.
Yeah. No, I'm not either. I mean, maybe I tweet twice a week, and it's always I tweet, and then someone sends me back something really critical, and maybe I'm just soft. I'm like, oh my god, I'm an idiot, or I'm worthless, or my business is shit, or whatever. And so, like, yeah, I just don't do it because there's just too much negativity. Anyways, that was not the point of. I put out a tweet about this thing of like, I don't see a lot of people talking about going from 5 to 6 figures, let's say, of like MRR, and,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people, kind of wrote back, or not a lot of, a couple of people wrote back, and they're like, yeah, I don't see that either. I don't see it either. Damian Thompson wrote back that he's looking at starting something like this as an interview show. So that would be super interesting. But yeah, I think that kind of getting in this niche or groove of, business scope is potentially a little different than a lot of the other podcasts out there. A lot of them focusing on, the VC track and, stuff that we can't relate to, or just getting started. And I think that's really valuable too, but just not where we are right now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's just balancing a lot of different priorities where, like we kind of said, is that we do have some level of product market fit. I don't think it's perfect, and there's a lot more work that I want to do there. So it's kind of balancing that where I'm still figuring things out on the product, but we're getting traction with like, oh shit, now all these other aspects of the business about growing a team, about how do I manage a team, about building culture, about like all those other things that you kind of don't think about as much in the early days because you're just kind of fighting for that initial traction, are all kind of coming to the surface. And I think there's a lot of interesting learnings that we're going through. And I'm sure many more that we'll have to go through. So I hope these topics will be interesting. And if people have suggestions, I guess you can tweet at Craig.
We'll come up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll find a way to get people to have people contact us. Yeah.
I have a question for you. And as we're talking
Yeah.
through this, I'm wondering this of myself: is, are you more stressed now? And I'll qualify that for you specifically, like now that you guys have revenue again after COVID, stuff, but like the last month, maybe, are you more stressed now, or like when you bought into the business and you guys were much smaller?
Yes, that's a good question. They're different stresses. Where like when we first bought the business, it was basically me and Matt, the founder, full time, and we very quickly brought on a full-time contract developer. And the stress then came from just like kind of diving in and not literally the first month when I was full time, it was just dealing with all this admin stuff of like setting up the corporation and making sure payroll's right, like doing all these things that I just didn't even think about at all, but just have to get done. And you come in with like this like growth plan, and then like the reality of running a business gets in the way, and you're like, oh, all these other things have to get done, and oh, there's no one else to do them other than me, so I guess I have to do them. And so that was like almost a more frustrating stress. And then like you're trying to get your head above water, you're trying to get through these things, and fortunately we grew pretty quickly early on, and that kind of did away with some of that like existential stress. We
Mm-hmm.
made the choice not to be profitable, but we could have been. And so like pretty early on, like that kind of stress was gone. And then it's just like you're dealing with all these customer complaints, but about like missing features, this and that. And like you agree with them, like, yeah, we should have that. And you're just not moving quickly. And so that kind of recently we've it's more that like we're not moving as quickly as I would like to stress.
Mm.
And we've kind of restructured the team a bit so that it's more flexible, where we're working more with contractors now rather than W-2 employees, and consultants and freelancers and this and that to kind of flex the team size up and down as needed. So that again, like right now I'm feeling really good about just like the default alive state of it, where not only are we profitable, but like we're both taking decent salaries and see a clear path to growing from there. But
Mm.
yeah, it's just like it's really a lot around the non-technical founder stuff where it's just like I there's only so much I can do on the getting the right people in there and making sure that things are going well on the product side of it, on development. And it's like those are the stress where it's just like you feel like you don't have as much control as you want.
Mm. Yeah.
And I'm doing like you try to find ways to level up your skills and as much as you can, but like I'm probably not going to pull a Brian Castle and like learn to code. But at the same time, it's just like finding that balance of making sure that like we're able to move the ball forward, in an area where I'm not an expert, and that brings a different kind of stress.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And in the middle of it all, with the zero revenue, it was like the stress was actually better, because like it wasn't an easy time, but at the same time, like we made the decision not to bill our customers during that period, so that was why revenue went to zero. And so it kind of gave me like a hall pass to just say like, yeah, there might be bugs there, but like you're not paying us any money, so I don't feel as bad about like, sorry, we're not going to fix that this month. And so then when we resumed billing, raised prices as well, which we had already planned to do. It's like, all right, this shit's real now. Like we can't kind of just like push things off and just kind of have people be okay with it. So that's kind of my life cycle of stress, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Gotcha. I guess for me, I think about we're about three years and a little bit into the business, like since we launched, and I guess at first it was just like major feature gaps everywhere.
Yep.
Like, I mean, just horrendous. And it was super stressful, like, because it was just me and Jonathan, our original and lead developer. And so it's just like, Jonathan, we don't have a way for customers to like redirect their feed if they want to leave. We have to build that like today. And, so he says, maybe I can get it done this week. And I say, okay, I'll, fight this customer off.
Yep.
And it
You're
was
kind of
just
on the
like
front lines, like just blocking for them.
all the time. Yeah. Yeah. And even now, I mean, I feel like we're quite feature complete, but, I know that Eileen on our support team is constantly coming to me with like, Craig, we don't do this. And I'm like, no, we don't, no, we don't update analytics every 2 minutes. No, we don't, whatever, allow you to export custom CSV files, all this stuff that like, and I think it's just a constant thing of like, people always want stuff you can't have. But I think that from a stress perspective, the place I've gotten in that respect is I'm not proud of saying no to the things I say
Right.
no to now, but I'm more cool with it to say, like, we have a really great tool, and the things that it doesn't do are kind of by choice at this point, because we know there are like some gaps over here, but we know that, so say we'll lose 2% of our business to those gaps we don't have, but we could get 100% or 25% more business over here by doing this integration or this big feature or this whatever. And so I guess I'm more at peace with that trade-off now. And I think that that's just like a function of time. Like you hear Rob Walling or Nathan Barry talk about like not taking a salary in their business until they're at like 50K in revenue or something. And I think that that's like part of it is like for a long, long, long time and a lot of revenue, your product sucks. And like,
Yeah. Yep.
and I think maybe again, like why we want to do this podcast, I think we both are kind of just getting out of that hole. And so like the path, going back to stress, the path from here to where we want to get to is a little different in that respect, because I'm not stressed about like, oh, the product doesn't do this or it's going to crash or whatever. But like, okay, we can get really strategic about like where we allocate revenue and development time and marketing and stuff like that, which is a whole different kind of way I spend my time. And it sounds like you do too, than like just massive fires and me in like the AWS dashboard resetting our database at like 7 o'clock Christmas morning a year and a half ago. I was in a AWS dashboard because the app crashed. And I was like,
Oh.
this is not like a life that I can live for long. And so now like that's just not, knock on wood, that's just not something I have to worry about. So
yeah, I think you and your team are a little ahead of us on that front, where like I can more comfortably kind of say, okay, what we have right now, a great product that works for kind of a specific segment of the market. There is a segment which is with more power users that, like, frankly, we didn't properly serve yet. But even for those ones now, like on the roadmap, I can see where we're like pretty close to getting there, and I think we're like months away from that. And so that's kind of taken off a lot of stress. Where like I can more confidently say, like, hey, we're not there now. Check back in the fall. Check back in the winter, and I think you'll like what you see. But like it doesn't kind of stress me out as much as it used to. But on the kind of infrastructure side of it, that's where a lot of our challenges have come from. Is we're managing dozens of data feeds, normalizing it, trying to clean it all up, making sure everything matches, feeding that into our simulator, which basically plays out all the games thousands of times. And then that's how we create our projections for the games. And like the behind the scenes stuff is like pretty complex and has a lot of like just random things can break. And so our developers often get pulled off of feature work for that, or then there's an update broke something in the front end and now they have to go fix that. And like we're now getting to the point where we have a much better handle on it, but we're still not quite there. And it's really just like that kind of extra level of sanity that we'll get, where it's not as though things will ever be truly smooth sailing, but a little bit smoother, a little less bumpy. Really excited for that. But I think you touch on another thing that I'm excited for us to kind of dig into more, and it's just kind of how we prioritize and how we think about what we work on, because it's something that I've had to just get much better at, and it's also been easier when there are less fires coming up. There are less kind of things to pull to the side or whatever it may be, but like trying to figure out like, okay, like we could refactor this code, but like how long will that take? Are we actually going to get an ROI there? Like, is it broken now? Will it break in the near future? If it breaks, how big of a deal is that?
Just how broken is broken? That's the question.
No, truly. Like there are some bugs that we don't want any bugs, but like some bugs are somewhat acceptable. But if it brings down the entire app, it's not. And so it's just like there's a scale there. And when we have limited resources, we're fortunate enough where we do have a decent development team. You have a bigger one than I do, but yeah, we're at 4 full-time developers plus me. But like even then, like we can't just throw all the developers at an issue. We can't just scale up super fast on that, and just whatever we want to work on, we work on. And there's a lot of things we want to do, a lot of things the developers want to do, a lot of things the customers want to do, a lot of things I want to do. And so it's just kind of figuring out the kind of calculus to at least get us pointed in a reasonably correct direction, because it'll never be perfect. But that's where I think there's a lot that we can really dig into, as I've just kind of had to get better at that.
Yeah. It's all those little trade-offs, right? It's, if we do this, we give up that. How do you try to put some numbers to that? And like, I know you're more analytical than I am in that respect. And so like, how do you, I think there's a fair amount of, finance even that goes along with some of these people decisions, and where resources and people hours are allocated. So I think we have a lot to talk about, which is cool. I'm excited to dig into some of these. I think this episode was really just to, let us talk about what we want to talk about a little bit, and let folks get to know us a little bit. Right. And I think maybe in the next episode, we'll talk about developers. I hope our developers don't listen to this. No, I'm sure they will.
It won't be just a ranting about developers, but no, we'll dig into some of the challenges we've had hiring, what's worked, what hasn't, and really what we're struggling with right now. And for me personally, this is something I'm literally right in the middle of doing. We're hiring more developers now. We're kind of planning out a major refactor to the back end, and a lot of things that we're figuring out. So I almost am just kind of selfishly hoping that Craig can give me some good advice on to help me avoid some of the mistakes. But if there are still going to be mistakes to be made, then at least I'll be able to share it with you all listening.
Yep. Awesome.
All right. Well, Craig, this was fun. I'm excited to be back next week, and I'll talk to you then.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks so much for checking out our first episode of Seeking Scale. For show notes and resources that we mentioned in this episode, head on over to seekingscale.com. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcasting app so you get every episode Monday morning as soon as we release it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.